Welcome back. I am continuing on with our multiplayer faction description for each of these different factions, and now I'm moving on to the Necrons here. These are, other than the Space Marines, I think these are the second easiest faction to play with. They are meant to be a mostly ranged faction, so they do an amazing job at it. So in terms of their commander units, HQ, they have three different types. The first one is the Overlord here. And what you're going to find is for the Tyranids, they have the most variability in terms of their kits to make changes. So by default, he starts with the Glaive. It's a pretty good melee unit, gets 2 different attacks, it has splash damage, so it makes him come out to be 275. If you're like, geez, that seems expensive for a Lord, it is, but he's an amazing Lord. He's by far the best HQ unit out of all the factions. Why? Because he has an Orb of Resurrection, where every 2 turns he can summon a full squad of Necron warriors. Unfortunately, when they get resurrected, they don't have an attack, so just keep that in mind when you select them. He's got the Phase Shift ability, where he gets additional evasion and minus 10% damage received, lasts for 1 turn. He's got the Command Protocol, which goes between the passing seasons, which gives you movement and ranged armor, versus momentum gains in melee. And then he has the Veil of Darkness, which is effectively a teleport ability for a movement of 5. If you want to use him as a ranged unit, then you would get him the Staff of Light. That gives him the ability to have 4 ranged attacks here with armor piercing, which is pretty good. So if you're going to sit back and get some shots, you can do that. It does have the ability to attack in melee as well, but it's not nearly as good. So just keep that in mind. But most people want to just keep them back, so if you're just going to hide them in the back, then give them the Glaive and run away. If you're actually going to use him in melee, though, you're going to want to use the War Scythe. It has 3 splash damage, good base damage, and has armor piercing of 6 with 2 attacks, so this guy can just shred and almost take out squads all by himself with those 2 attacks. So keep that into consideration. Just a great hero unit that's good at pretty much everything. The next command unit is the Plasmamancer. These guys are crazy good. At 250 points, they're probably appropriately priced, but for this Quantum Orb, it's effectively a nuke. So you end up dropping a 112 to 150 points of damage at armor piercing of 6 in the center, and does splash damage with an armor piercing of 3 of everything around there. So effectively it can do a 9 square damage, which is just great. It has the Harbinger of Destruction. I have very mixed feelings about this. It says that it has an accuracy of 80%, but it definitely feels like it only hits about 60% of the time. And given how powerful both his ranged and melee attacks are, I rarely use this. I guess maybe if there was a bunch of Gretchen all together or other low tier units, I would maybe consider using it, but I just find that it misses way more than I think it's going to. And then his other ability, which is really quite good, is this Tesla Weave. So if you're fighting a melee-based faction, you just put him back here, you use this, it arcs apart all nearby units within 1 tile, and then when the melee units attack those units, they get 50% of the damage reflected back onto the attacker, which is great. For his melee attack, he's got a splash of 3. It says he's got a base damage of 18 to 24. Oh, this is the ranged attack. Sorry, I was confused there because I say that definitely does more than that when he's in melee. So he's got a nice splash damage here with armor piercing, so he can do damage to vehicles and infantry. And then the part that I think is a little bit bizarre is this plasmatic lance. I think this is a little bit too overpower myself, because he does 60 to 80 base with 36 to 48 splash times 3. So that's better than, say, the Terminators, and this guy effectively gets 2 actions, so he can take out like a squad of Terminators, a bunch of other things, all by himself. So this guy is just amazing at everything. He's good at range, he's good at melee, he's got good abilities. As long as you don't leave him hanging there after he nukes a bunch of units and getting them sacrificed, he will repay dividends in terms of what he can do for you. The next command unit is the Hexmark Destroyer. This is also a very, very good unit. By having his pistols, he can automatic trigger Overwatch to charging units. It's got 3 armor piercing. Doesn't seem like that would do much damage, but for whatever reason it seems like even though it's armor piercing a 3, it damages effectively everything. It's got the ability to use this multi-threat emitter, which allows you to select 3 different units with a single attack, and it spreads out the attack, so therefore you do 25% less shots with less range stability. However, if you combine that with the target optimizer, it allows your hits to automatically hit no matter what the hit chance is. It drains your movement points, but in exchange it gives you 10% critical. So 10% critical on a bunch of shots here divided along 3 units, you can really do a lot of damage. Or you can just focus fire on a vehicle or enemy hero and you can effectively snipe them out. So these guys are very, very good. And he's got 2 action points. So next unit is the Necrons. These guys are kind of your low tier standard infantry. They've got 4 armor. The big thing about this is when we get to it, we'll eventually find weapons that have living lightning, which are amazing at shredding at low tier units. Don't use that against other Necron players, because other than the filleted one and the death marks and the scarabs, it's gonna the living lightning will effectively not damage the rest of the unit, so you'll screw yourself. I've learned that the hard way, so if you're playing against another Necron player, no living lightning, or minimal living lightning, I would say. You have 2 different options here. You have the Gauss Flayer and you have the Gauss Ripper. The Ripper is good if you're thrown into melee, because then these guys can effectively act as your shield to do a bunch of damage to them, but I would find most players typically use the Gauss Flayer so they can just use the ranged attacks. Both can do a good amount of damage. And then, as I was talking about with the Space Marines and a couple of the other factions, this reanimation protocol, most Necron units, minus their hero command units, have the ability to use reanimation protocols, and what that does, it gives you a 40% chance for 2 models to restore at 50% health. And each time a unit dies, it gives you a 40% chance to resurrect up to the 2 models. So, if you're getting attacked, they kill 3 models, only one of those 3 models resurrects, then the next time they attack you, you have those 3 models, you now have another 40% chance per model destroyed to have another unit come back to life. So it can be really frustrating for another player to totally eliminate your units. This is considered a basic unit as well for the Necrons, but these guys are more expensive. I consider them to be more of a medium tier infantry, but they have 6 armor, so again, Living Lightning is going to do jack shit to them. They have the ability to be a little bit longer range, so they have 3 attacks, 9 to 12, armor piercing of 4, so good damage. Or if you're going to be fighting low tier units or Space Marines, Tesla Carbine. The Tesla Carbine, for whatever reason, can do good damage against a lot of the infantry units. For the Space Marines, especially their Assault Marines, but for whatever reason it really sucks against the Necrons themselves. So Living Lightning, and what that effectively does is their regular attacks have splash damage, and then Living Lightning on the top of that does 25% chance with each successful shot to arc to the nearby enemy, and that's nearby squads, and that can deal 70% damage to them. So if they have a bunch of guys, low tier infantry all grouped up, you can absolutely do a shit ton of damage by taking advantage of the Living Lightning. I've won a lot of matches using Living Lightning like that. Next unit is the Lich Guard. I personally do not like the Lich Guard very much. I see a lot of, I would say maybe about 50% of Necron players do like the Lich Guard. I can say I've only ever seen Lich Guard equipped with the Dispersion Shields and the Hyperphase Swords. The reason for that is they get minus 10% damage received, they get additional armor, which brings them up to 7. And if they're going to use them to protect their Overlord, they use the Guardian Protocol, which swaps place with the HQ unit if it's attacked by ranged within 3 tiles, and these guys will then take all the damage and they get a 10% bonus to their HP. So that's how you'd effectively use these guys. The other option is to give them the War Size, which I guess would be good. It's got an armor piercing of 8, so you'd effectively turn these into just massive damage dealers against one unit. So you're talking about, 5 times 25 would be 125 to 180 something, 190, but I think most people would rather have the sword and shield, and that way they're able to survive, because if these are guys, while they do a lot of damage, it's only one attack, and if they miss, they're in trouble, whereas this gives them much more survivability, which is usually what you want these guys to be, is they're meant to be tanks, so that's how most people will use them. Death marks, one of my favorite Necron units. It's hard to go wrong with the death marks. These are like your anti-vehicle, anti-enemy hero units. They have armor piercing of 6, they've got a range of 6, and every 3 turns they get to use the Hunter's Mark, which gives you 30% accuracy and 15% critical hit chance. So if you have them in kind of a not a great position, you see a hero that maybe has a bunch of evasion or something, pop this on them, do a bunch of attacks, get 15% chance to crit them, and do just a bunch of damage. The other great ability that they have is this dimensional translocation. Gives them the ability to teleport up to 10 tiles. They can do it twice per match. The unfortunate, well, I guess it's fortunate or else it'd be too overpowered. It does use up their action points, so just keep that into consideration when you're using it. But if they're surrounded in melee, can't get out, can't get any good shots off, teleport them out of there. And then again, they have the reclamation protocol as well. So, alright, the next unit is the Filleted Ones. I have very mixed feelings on these guys. Kinda, in addition to sniping units, I should say, with these teleports, they also can be extremely OP and very troublesome on strategic command points, because you can just teleport 10 tiles and end up taking points. So it definitely can be very frustrating. So make sure if you're fighting a bunch of death marks, you're either killing them if you're worried about them taking the strategic points, or keep your units on the strategic point to make sure these guys can't teleport on top of it and take it. Likewise, these are the other units that can be a little bit bothersome. I personally don't like Filleted One because I find them a little bit too easy to kill, but these guys can do a good amount of damage. They have 2 attacks, so that way, and they have 5 armor piercing, so they can definitely do good damage, and they can also do a lot of good damage to vehicles, and more importantly, Tyranid HQ units and their heavies. These are good guys against them, so you could consider that. They have the ability to teleport as well, and their big thing is if you're able to keep them alive and they get kills, they can do a shit ton of damage. I personally cannot ever keep them alive enough to get the big damage bonuses, but I suppose that's one of their big payoffs here. So they have flesh hunger. So what this effectively does is they have a 60% chance on killing organic model to get 30% damage against organics and plus 1 armor piercing against organics, and then this can stack up to 4 times. So as you can imagine, if you were to get these to stack on, you could potentially do a shit ton of damage with these guys if you kept them alive, and they can get the reclamation protocols, so they can be a nuisance to kill, and if you lock guys down, they can do good damage against them. Unfortunately, with only 4 armor, they are easy to kill with most other units, so it's definitely a high risk, high reward thing if you can keep them alive. The next unit, these are the jump infantry for the Necrons. They have both range and melee. Most people will use them as a melee though. Gives them 2 attacks, 12 to 16, it's got 4 armor piercing. Oh, sorry, that's the ranged attack here. So they're okay. They can do damage to pretty much anything at range, but it's not fantastic. It's not going to be a game changer by any means. And then their melee is 1 attack, 19 to 26, 5 armor piercing. So they can do some damage. They're not amazing at it. Space Marines are going to outclass them for damage. The big thing for them is, you know, they also have the reanimation protocols, which can be nice. And then the gravity displacement pack is effectively their version of the jet pack. Big benefit for that is it doesn't affect their range if you want to get some range shots off. At ranges at armor of 6, they can be a little difficult to kill using lower tier units, but overall an okay unit, jump pack unit, nothing special. Kind of, you get what you'd expect. It has a bunch of movement, so it can get up to 7 movement with the jumps, so do with it what you want. A lot of Necron players like them. I personally have not found a great use for them. The next unit is an elite unit. Scorptech, I think is how you say it, destroyers. These guys can be very good. They can also be very hard to utilize because they only have 3 movement. The nice thing about them, again, they have the reanimation protocols. If you use their standard attack, it has splash damage, so they can take care of just slicing through a bunch of weak armored units and do pretty good damage. Alternatively, if you want them to do a lot of damage against vehicles and things, you would give them the Hyperphase Reap Blade. Has 1 attack, 45 to 60, armor piercing of 9, and then if you're feeling really lucky, you can use this ability here. What this is the Plasmacide Infusion. It makes a ranged field charge attack, but it has a chance of killing one of your destroyers. That's always very sad when that happens, because it's a 35% chance that it will be destroyed, so it doesn't happen infrequently, so it's definitely a major... it feels really bad when it does destroy one of the units, but if it doesn't and they have these, oh my god, they do a shit ton of damage. You know, it gives them 25% crit chance, 75% damage on, you know, a... what would that be, 135 to 180 damage here, plus another 75% damage from there at armor piercing of 9. These guys can effectively just kill almost anything or any hero when they get into melee, and they get this attack off with all 3 units. Obviously some vehicles you may take more than 1 attack, but these guys can do some major damage if you can get them into combat. Again, with 3 movement, most units can outrun them, so it's hard to get them into combat. The Locust Heavy Destroyers. Boy, I struggle with these guys. I feel like whenever I play against them, other players get good rolls, and it keeps encouraging me to be like, gosh, I really want to try these guys. And then when I play with them, I just get bad rolls, and I'm like, why did I waste 125 points on these guys? They have 180 health points by themselves, and then they have the reanimation protocol. Unfortunately, it's only one model at 25% health, so for whatever reason, I find that a lot of other players, when theirs get killed, they tend to make that 25% or that 40% roll, hit roll. For me, I never do. There's 2 ways to use them. The first one is like an anti-infantry one, so 6 attacks, armor piercing of 4. They've got a range of 5, which is good, so they can do good damage. The other way is to set them up as an anti-vehicle. Has 1 attack, 60 to 80, armor piercing of 8. So this is kind of their anti-vehicle variant. I personally, like I said, I really struggle with these guys, so I don't like to use them, but they can. I have definitely seen them pay dividends for other players. Scarabs. These are fun little units here. They have, as you can tell, a bunch of different units. What, 3, 6, 9, 10 units per squad. They only have 10 health, so they're easy to kill if you have units that have a bunch of attacks or have a bunch of splash damage. The part that I'm really confused about is I've been seeing a lot of Necron players just spam Scarabs. And you would think with an armor piercing of 2, these guys would barely do any damage. But for whatever reason, if you can get these guys to flank a hero, like the Necron Lord or the Plasmamancer, they're doing like consistently 60 to 80 damage per attack, and then they're locking the units down, and they have, because they have 5 movement, they can just always move around and get more flanks, because by the time they start getting attacks, it tends to break their the unit they're attacking's zone of control. So I gotta play around more with these guys. They're very good at capturing points with all their movement, so for strategic command they're good at soaking up Overwatch, especially with super elite tier units that only have a certain amount of attacks. They have the ability to resurrect 2 of their units. I guess I haven't seen other people use the self-destruct protocol. I'm not sure why I would use that exactly. Maybe if you're fighting other Scarabs and you wanted to try to get kills, but I would assume that you would just use a regular attack and do just as much. So I can't say I've figured out a use for the self-destruct protocol. And then these guys have hover, so they can have even better ability to just run around and lock units down. So they can be a big freaking nuisance if you get them into combat and mess up the ranged units. The next unit, and these are effectively like the land speeders. These are their hit and run. They have 6 movement. The tomb blades here, they're pretty good. Even at default, they're okay. I can't say I ever see anybody use the regular weapons anymore. It's either you're going to be fighting a low tier unit that you want to use the living lightning attacks, in which case for 115 you have a highly mobile unit here that can do a bunch of damage. It has the nebuloscope, which allows you to ignore cover penalties and get range stability, or you can end up boosting their evasion for the cost for minus accuracy. Or if you're going to be fighting a little heavier tier armored units, you give them the twin Gauss blasters. Even at optimal range of 4, they still have great chances of hitting at distances greater than that. They have 12 attacks, so I definitely really like these units here. The one downfall that they have compared to the other Necron units is there's no reanimation protocol on these guys, so once they're dead, and they don't have great armor, so almost anything can kill them, so be careful. They're glass cannons. The last unit here for the Necrons is the Annihilation Barge. Kind of a fun unit if you can keep them alive and you get their momentum high. These guys can heal for an amazing amount of damage because they have 360. So their base is they have 4 attacks with armor piercing of 6, so this allows them to do good damage against enemy heroes, do pretty good damage against vehicles. It's got good range, and then as a free attack every 2 turns it has a 20 attack living lightning to help take care of low tiered infantry. If you want to double up on just working on clearing swarms, you'll give them the Tesla cannon, which will give you another 10 shots here with splash damage for additional living lightning attacks, so they can really clear out a lot of just low tier infantry, so good against like Tyranids and things like that. But I'd find that most players probably are doing this and then using the living lightning as the free attack. The other thing to realize about the Annihilation Barge is it has quantum shielding, so it automatically gets 15% less damage, and it is volatile, so it will explode doing the 50 to 70 damage to nearby units, and it's hover, so it can get across damaging terrain. So I would say by far most players are getting one Necron Lord as their main Lord. I, like I said, really like the Plasma Mancers, plus or minus what our other players use. I tend to find with the 2,000 to 3,000 point battles, they're pretty consistently being selected. At 2,000 less, then it's hit or miss. I'm surprised that a lot more players don't use these. I certainly like to use them at the higher point matches because they're good against a lot of different units. However, if you're in a big open map, sometimes it's hard to get these guys into combat. I think you could make a strong argument for making a huge Necron warrior army because they could be harder to kill with their reanimation protocols, but I don't find that most people do that. A lot of people will make their infantry backbone to be out of Necron Immortals. Like I said, usually get 1 or 2 Lich Guards when you're playing opponents. I personally never select these guys because I can't get them to pay off for themselves. Almost every Necron player, no matter the point value, will get at least 1 Death Mark. The more points, the more you have, just because they have so much utility. Can be anti-vehicle, anti-hero, flayed ones. I occasionally see 1 or 2 of these being brought by other Necron players at higher point values. Strongly consider them for a low cost unit to capture strategic points, to help get easy strategic point victories, but for the most part I don't find them to get selected. Necron jump infantry tend to be the weakest jump infantry out of all the factions in my opinion, and for whatever reason I tend to find, I don't know if it's bugged, but I just have not found their reanimation protocols to be triggered nearly as much as the 40%. Like, you know, Necron Warriors, Necron Immortals, it seems, even Death Marks, it seems like they're consistently being reanimated. I have seen both for this. Almost always the Scarabs will have at least some sort of reanimation, plus or minus on these guys, but I think I've only seen like 2 units of these guys have the reanimation successfully happen here, so I don't know if it's bugged out or what, but it just doesn't feel like it's 40% for those guys. So if you like jump infantry, definitely bring them, but for me, I hardly ever use them. super high damage dealers, hard to get into combat. If there's lots of cover and you can just come across the corner and do some good damage, these guys will definitely pay dividends for you. Again, excellent long-range units to do a lot of damage, but I think there's better uses for your points here. You have to choose between the anti-infantry and the anti-vehicle. Scarabs, bane of my existence in the last couple of matches I've been playing. Early far movement, good to capture strategic points, good to hold points, also good at getting behind units and killing, sniping down heroes, surprisingly, is what I've been finding with their flank attack, so consider doing that. Nice hit and run units here with the Tomb Blades, so consider bringing them, and very good at capturing points with their 6 movement. And then Annihilation Barge, very expensive, but good damage dealing. If you can keep it alive, it'll definitely pay dividends for you throughout the whole match. So that's kind of my thoughts on the Necrons. Again, a heavily ranged faction. Other than the Space Marines, I think these are probably the second easiest faction to use. They're very forgiving. They do a bunch of damage. It's just kind of a click and shoot, point and shoot faction. Don't have to worry about you know, stacking a bunch of buffs and things like that. So it just makes it a very, very forgiving faction. And with some of the maps, Necrons have huge advantages if there's a wide corridor that they can get around and get shots in. So thanks for watching. I hope this gives you some ideas on my opinion on some of these multiplayer units and helps you with kind of make a decision about when you would and would not select these forces. So I hope you have a good day. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying these videos, please give my channel a like and subscribe. Encourage me to post more content for you. Have a great day.